The supermarket was bustling with activity. Customers moved in and out, some chatting, others rushing to finish their shopping. The hum of conversation mixed with the beeping of registers and the occasional squeak of shopping cart wheels. Behind one of the checkout counters stood Emily, a young woman in her mid-20s. She had warm eyes and a gentle smile, the kind that put people at ease. No matter how long her shift was or how demanding the customers got, she remained patient and kind. Emily had been working at the supermarket for a while, balancing this job with her studies. She never complained. Even when exhaustion weighed on her, she knew this was just a step toward her future. As she finished scanning a customer's groceries, the automatic doors slid open, and a man walked in. He was tall, well-groomed, and dressed in an expensive designer suit. A gold watch gleamed on his wrist, and he carried himself with an air of superiority. His sharp eyes scanned the store, and his lips curled slightly as if he found everything unimpressive. His name was Richard, and to him wealth equaled worth. Richard grabbed a few high-end items, tossing them into his cart without much thought, and made his way to the checkout line. When he reached Emily's register, he sighed dramatically, tapping his fingers against the counter. Finally, he muttered, loud enough for others to hear, "This place is painfully slow." Emily remained polite, scanning his items without reacting to his tone, but Richard wasn't done. "I don't know how people work these jobs every day," he scoffed, shaking his head. "Must be miserable, huh? Stuck in a dead-end job, barely making ends meet." A few customers glanced over, sensing the tension. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat, refusing to let his words get to her. She simply smiled, finished ringing up his total, and handed him the receipt. Richard smirked, shaking his head. "Well, good luck with whatever this is," he said, grabbing his bags and walking off with a chuckle. Emily exhaled slowly, pushing the insult aside. She had dealt with rude customers before, but something about Richard's arrogance stung more than usual. Still, she reminded herself, this was just a job, not her future. If only he knew. Emily kept her expression neutral, her hands steady as she bagged Richard's items. She had dealt with difficult customers before, impatient ones, grumpy ones, even condescending ones, but something about Richard's arrogance stung more than usual. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, as if she were beneath him. Or maybe it was because, deep down, she was tired of people assuming her worth based on the uniform she wore, but she refused to let him see that. "People like you will never make it big," Richard scoffed, shaking his head with a smirk. His voice was laced with amusement, as if the thought of someone like her succeeding was laughable. Emily felt her stomach tighten, but she remained silent. Arguing wouldn't change anything. People like Richard thrived on belittling others. A few customers overheard the remark, shifting uncomfortably. Some glanced at Emily with sympathy, but no one spoke up. It wasn't their fight. It never was. Emily finished ringing up his last item and read out the total. Richard paid without a second glance, grabbed his bags, and strutted toward the exit. Just before stepping out, he turned back slightly, as if to take one last look at her, and chuckled. Then he was gone. The moment the doors slid shut behind him, Emily exhaled slowly, her hands clenched under the counter, but she quickly loosened them. There was no point in letting someone like him get under her skin. She had grown up in a humble home, where hard work was valued more than status. Her parents had done everything they could to provide for her, and she refused to let their sacrifices be in vain. This job was temporary, a stepping stone. What Richard didn't know, what he would never have guessed, was that Emily was putting herself through college. Every night after her shift, she attended finance classes, pushing through exhaustion, because she had a dream bigger than this supermarket. She wasn't stuck, she was climbing, and one day people like Richard would see her differently, but by then, it would be too late. A few weeks had passed since Richard's encounter with Emily at the supermarket, and in that short time, his world had taken a sharp turn for the worse. His business, once thriving, was now on the verge of collapse. What had seemed like brilliant investments were now backfiring, draining his accounts faster than he could recover. Markets had shifted unpredictably, partners had pulled out, and his debts were piling up. For the first time in years, Richard felt a tight knot of worry in his chest. His lavish lifestyle had always been supported by his business success, and the thought of losing everything sent a wave of panic through him. But he wasn't about to give up. He had built his fortune once, he could do it again. All he needed was a loan, just enough to keep things running, until he turned it around. So he did what any businessman in his position would do. He scheduled an appointment at one of the most prestigious banks in the city. He had been a client there for years, and he was sure they would approve his request without hesitation. After all, he had always been seen as a man of status, someone who knew how to make money. The morning of his appointment, Richard took extra care with his appearance. He chose an expensive suit, polished his shoes, and made sure his watch gleamed under the light. First impressions mattered, and he wanted to project confidence and control. He walked into the bank's grand lobby, with his head held high, flashing a charming smile at the receptionist as he announced his appointment. As he was led to a waiting area, he checked his reflection in the glass window. He looked the part, composed, successful, powerful. That was all that mattered. No one needed to know how desperately he needed this loan. Minutes passed, and Richard reassured himself that this was just a minor setback. He had been through rough patches before, and he always found a way out. Money moved in cycles, his fortune would return soon. Then, the office door opened. Richard turned, expecting to see a middle-aged bank executive in a tailored suit, but instead, his confident expression faltered, his breath caught in his throat. Standing in the doorway, dressed in an elegant business outfit, was Emily, his former cashier, the woman he had mocked, and judging by the badge on her blazer, she wasn't just a bank employee, she was his loan officer. The shift in power was undeniable. Richard's smirk faded the moment his eyes met Emily's. His posture stiffened, his fingers tightening around the armrest of his chair, as if gripping onto the last shred of his confidence. It couldn't be. For a second, he thought he was imagining things. Maybe it was someone who just looked like her. But no, there was no mistake. The same face he had looked down on at the supermarket now stood before him, not in a cashier's uniform, but in a crisp, well-fitted blazer. A nameplate on her blazer read Emily Carter, Senior Loan Officer. Emily stepped forward with practiced grace, holding a folder of documents in one hand. She placed them neatly on the desk, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Richards," she said, her tone professional, "I'll be handling your loan application today." Richard swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. This wasn't how this meeting was supposed to go. He was supposed to be the one in control, the one making the demands. But now, his fate rested in the hands of the woman he had humiliated weeks ago. He forced a laugh, trying to mask his unease. "Well, this is unexpected," he said, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "Small world, huh?" Emily didn't respond to his forced attempt at casualness. She simply sat down, opened his file, and glanced over the documents with the same calm focus she had likely practiced many times before. "Shall we begin?" she asked, ignoring the tension in the room. Richard nodded stiffly, feeling the sweat begin to form at the back of his neck. He needed to regain control, but how? He had walked into this office with the belief that his status, his charm, and his past successes would guarantee approval, but now, none of that mattered. Emily flipped through his financial records, her eyes scanning each page carefully. "I see you're requesting a substantial loan," she said, her voice steady. "Before we proceed, I'll need to go over your financial history." Richard shifted again. "Look, Emily," he began, attempting to soften his voice, "I think we got off on the wrong foot before. I didn't mean anything by what I said back at the store. You know how things are. Long days, stress, sometimes people say things they don't mean." Emily finally met his gaze. Her expression didn't change. "Is that so?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. Richard let out a weak chuckle. "Come on, we don't have to make this awkward, right?" Emily leaned back slightly, folding her hands together. "Mr. Richards, my job is to assess financial risk and determine whether approving this loan is in the bank's best interest," she said coolly. "That's all this meeting is about." Her tone was polite, but firm. There was no resentment in her voice, no sign of pettiness. She wasn't here to humiliate him. She was simply doing her job, but that made it even worse. Richard suddenly realized the undeniable truth. Emily had all the power in this room, and there was nothing he could do about it. Richard's palms grew clammy as Emily flipped through his financial records, with the same cool detachment he had once admired in bankers. But now, that same professionalism made his stomach twist. She skimmed the pages, occasionally making notes, her expression unreadable. The silence in the room stretched, thick and suffocating. Richard forced himself to sit still, but his knee bounced under the table. Emily finally looked up. "Mr. Richards, I see that your business has experienced some volatility." Richard forced a smile. "It's just a rough patch," he said quickly. "I've built my company from the ground up. These things happen." Emily nodded but didn't look convinced. She turned another page. "Your investments over the past year have been high risk, with multiple losses. Your debt-to-income ratio has risen significantly, and you have several outstanding loans with other institutions." Richard shifted in his seat. "That's the nature of business. You have to take risks to make money." Emily remained unfazed. "True, but banks require stability before approving a loan of this size." She tapped the document in front of her. "Right now, your records don't show stability. They show a pattern of reckless decision-making." Richard's heart pounded. He had come in here expecting an easy approval, not a grilling. He tried to salvage the situation. "Look, Emily," he said, forcing his voice to be smooth. "I've been in this business for years. I've made millions. My track record speaks for itself." Emily didn't blink. "Your past successes are noted, but right now, your financial health is at risk. Banks don't operate on past glories, Mr. Richards. They operate on numbers. And right now, yours don't look promising." Richard swallowed. "Come on, we can work something out, right? Maybe adjust the loan terms. I've always been a valued client here." Emily clasped her hands together. "The bank's policies are clear. Based on your current financial standing, I'm unable to approve your loan request." The words hit him like a brick to the chest. His breath caught, his face turning pale. "You can't be serious," he stammered. "You're really rejecting me?" Emily didn't gloat, she didn't smirk, she simply closed the file and slid it to the side. "I understand this isn't the outcome you were hoping for," she said calmly, "but our decision is final." Richard sat frozen, his mind racing. He had walked in here thinking his status, his name and his past would carry him through, but none of it mattered now. For the first time he truly understood. Karma had finally caught up with him. Richard stood up slowly, feeling lightheaded, his mouth felt dry, and his usually confident posture was gone. He had walked into this office, believing he was in control, but now he was leaving with nothing. No loan, no power, no illusion of superiority. As he stepped out of the office, the weight of humiliation pressed down on him. His own arrogance had blinded him to reality. He had mocked Emily, laughed at her struggles, never once considering that life could turn the tables, and yet, here he was powerless before the very person he had belittled. For the first time in his life, he felt truly small. Meanwhile, Emily took a deep breath, as she closed Richard's file, and set it aside. She didn't feel the need to gloat, or celebrate his downfall. That wasn't who she was. She had never wished for revenge, only for respect. And now, life had given her the justice she never asked for but quietly deserved. As she walked back to her desk, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: empowerment. Not because she had denied Richard's loan, but because she had proven to herself that she was more than what people assumed. She had climbed her way up from that supermarket job, and no one, not even someone like Richard, could take that from her. Outside, Richard walked out of the bank, his head lowered. The world suddenly felt different, less predictable. He had spent years believing that power and wealth made him untouchable, but now he knew the truth. Life had a way of humbling even the proudest souls, and in the end, respect was worth more than any fortune. Life has a way of teaching us lessons in the most unexpected ways. This story is a reminder that no matter where someone is today, you never know where they'll be tomorrow. Success and failure can change hands in an instant, but kindness and respect will always hold their value. Always treat people with dignity, whether they're a cashier, a CEO, or anyone in between, because in the end, it's not money or status that defines a person, but their character. If you enjoyed this story, and believe in the power of karma, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed a situation like this? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to hear more powerful and inspiring stories, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload.